I want to talk about the defense. It's Nick Sorensen's defense. They're trying to keep things the same, yada, yada, yada. But Brandon Staley is not a wide nine guy. He comes from the Vic Fangio tree. He's a 3-4 guy. Um, he's a linebacker coach, and he's good at scheming up pressure, which is something the Niners really haven't done very much of the last few years. So let's talk about Leonard Floyd, who was their first signing, and he's Staley's protege, coached him in Chicago, coached him on the Rams. He's a 3-4 outside linebacker. Kind of an awkward fit in a 4-3 defense. He's a little bit smaller. But there's some benefits. So there's some weaknesses. He might be a little bit, soft against the run, setting the edge. But there are things you can do with him that you couldn't do with other 4-3 DNs, like drop him into coverage. So it seems to me that if the 49ers are going to become more exotic with their pressures, they can do things where they put him in a 3-point stance, they drop him into a short curl zone, and all of a sudden bring pressure off the other side and try to get one-on-one matchups between a linebacker and a running back. These are things they weren't really doing last year under Steve Wilks. I don't know if he didn't have the ideas or Nick Bosa didn't let him, but I think like having that kind of a 3-4 outside linebacker on the field is going to give the Niners new options.
Yeah. That's all you want really is variety. Like with Wilks, their blitzing was so vanilla. Like forever just going back to that Super Bowl, it's like, you had Spagnuolo's defense being so effective with their blitzing. Amazing.
That was the difference in the game in a lot of ways.
Yeah, the players are blitzing nearly the same, or nothing too off it, but it wasn't working at all. Ones are just go ahead, just shoot. Like there's no cuteness, there's no creativity. At least with Floyd, you can get that creativity back, right? I think I don't know. Honestly, I don't even know if he's going to be. I think where it gets tricky is how are you going to be able to use him as an every down lineman? Is he even going to be an every down lineman? I feel like he's not going to be. The money might suggest it, but it's just because you're paying them that. Does that make sense to actually expose your defense that badly? So I wouldn't imagine he would do that unless teams are it's 3rd and 6, and it's maybe let's just run it at Floyd, see how he does. I'm curious to see how that will be key. How offense will attack him and how the 49ers will respond in that way. Because I pretty much fully view him as the D forward role, just pass specialist, just go out there, give us 25 snaps and we're good.
Let's talk scheme. I mean, usually there's a battle offense versus defense in the league, and it seems like this last year it was sort of dominated by defenses that brought pressure, simulate not just pressure but disguised pressure, 4-man rushes, but you don't know who's rushing. Teams that were able to sort of generate free rushers, all that stuff was paramount this year. The Ravens did it well, the Chiefs did it well, and the Niners didn't do it well. They gave up a ton of pressure in the Super Bowl because they couldn't pick up or decipher these pressure packages. Immediately after the Super Bowl, they tried to hire Steve Spagnuolo, who drew him up and called him. So you can sort of see what the Niners are thinking. We want that. That beat us. The Seahawks just got it. They hired the Baltimore Ravens defensive coordinator, Mike McDonald, as their head coach. So teams that have, Kyle Shanahan appreciates good defense. It beat him. That's what he wants. And Nick Sorensen can't provide it. It's not his background. He's a DB coach. Bring in Brandon Staley, who does have that background. So I think maybe one thing we're going to see this year from this team is Brandon Staley's probably going to be drawing up the pressures. I wouldn't think that's going to be Sorensen. Again, he's a DB guy. DBs aren't really involved in pressures like that very much sometimes. So the Staley effect, go back and watch what he was calling with the Rams and the Chargers, what kind of blitzes he was calling, because that's probably what you're going to see with the Niners. And go back and look what he was doing with Leonard Floyd in 2020. I haven't done it yet. Something to think about.
That actually might be a good pairing too, because look, remember he spent that year, Nick Sorensen with the linebackers, and he spent that year with DeMeco Ryans. So I think some of those linebacker pressures, they'll be able to connect it well with Staley. And as for Shanahan, that makes sense. He wants that creative defense because he himself is obviously a very good disguiser of his offense. And let me get that for my defense. Because it really was just straight vanilla last year. There wasn't really too much cuties. It was kind of easy to tell what their covered, where everything was going. Not too much, not too much. It wasn't enough. But now you get this, and it'll be more efficient. And with a versatile piece like Floyd, like how you mentioned, who can give you those two dynamics of dropping in or pass rushing, that now it's what are we going to do? It's like a pitcher. You can't just have one elite pitch. You have to have multiple that you're very effective with.
Yeah. And the way I sort of judge the effectiveness of a blitz or whatever you want to call it, a pressure scheme, is are you able to generate a free rusher?
Yeah.
You're trying to do. You're trying to sort of trick the offense and get someone unblocked. And I don't think the Niners did that very much. I feel like Robert Saleh was able to do that. He didn't blitz on first and second down very much, but on third down, he was very clever. He would blitz K'Wan Williams. He would put DeForest Buckner at nose tackle, and which would sort of force the center to slide to his direction, then bring pressure from the other side. Like, he's very clever. Nothing against Wilkes, but again, he's a DB coach. So I thought the Niners had some of the best coverage they've had in a long time. You could see his impact on all those corners. I still think he made an impact on those corners. You could debate if it was other guys, but Travarius Ward was great last year. I think Wilkes deserves some credit for that. But the reason the Niners like those linebacker coaches is because linebackers are involved in a little bit of everything, right? Run defense, pass rush, pressure, coverage. They're in the middle of everything.
I'm not sure how much credit Ward himself would give Wilkes. I actually asked him about that at the Super Bowl, and he said,
Laughed.
"Oh yeah, right. Like I was cool, but I knew for myself, like if I just locked in, like zero credit." I was like, "Oh, okay." But
I think he deserves a little credit for Jair Brown, rookie.
I think ultimately, yeah, you get a little bit, no matter what these players are going to say, you get a little bit. Not when you were mentioning blitzing, I started thinking like, yeah, those blitzings from Saleh were great with K'Wan Williams, and like D'Amico Ryans again wasn't a high volume blitzer, but he had effective blitzes with Fred Warner. You would occasionally see Dre Greenlaw too.
Yeah.
And Hufanga was great at that too. What I realized is I remember you said this like a week or two ago, when Hufanga when he was still healthy, he was like the main DB blitzer of the 49ers. I don't think they ever did that with Leonard. I don't know if because Leonard is like a little too skinny, or I don't know. But once he went out, I don't recall seeing any DB blitzing at all. There wasn't enough like shadowing. Everything just was like, okay, it's obviously Fred Warner's just going to line up in the A and B gap. He's going to shoot there, or they're just going to – it felt too predictable. You know, that was the thing. Like everything just felt too predictable. And now you have guys who can give you these different arrays of play calling that will make you more effective again, because that's ultimately what Shannon is probably, you know, he's an offensive guy. If he's probably watching it and he's like, dude, I know what to attack against this defense so easily. Why are you making this so vanilla? I think that's why he also had a hand in it with Wilkes. It's like, dude, what are you calling this? And I go back to that Minnesota Vikings week where he was pissed off about that cover zero blitz at the end of the half. And I'm not sure, aside from it being situationally, I think he was more like teed off, like, bro, like of all the blitzes, you couldn't even make it more clever. Like you literally showed that it was it. And Kirk was like, oh, okay, I know where I'm going. Like you're making the quarterback's decision way easier than it needs to be.
Right. And so like those blitzes that Wilkes would call, I feel like he would call 5-man rushes with man coverage behind it, or 6-man rushes. I'm talking about more zone blitzing here. I'm talking about dropping Leonard Floyd into a zone and then bringing a nickel off the other side and trying to get an unblocked rusher, trying to get the offensive line to slide to Floyd. And that, I mean, I think that's sort of what the kind of stuff they're going to try to do this year. Or they better.
Because remember, Sarson does have that Seattle background, so I think we'll see like more like that heavy cover 3 zone again. And you kind of get back to the root. I think that's why Shanahan pretty much did go with him. And you bring Staley in as a possible contingency in case like things don't go wrong. But if anything, it's like cool. We get like a little dude giving him the ear for a first timer, and maybe we somehow build a connection. Because that's ultimately why I think they took those 3 weeks. Is I know they were looking at candidates, but I think it was more so how it would work between the two. And they pretty much like I feel like that's what the weeks were spent doing, trying to get them two to hash out. I want the plan. I want to know now. Can you work together? Yes. This is what it's going to be. I won't hear nothing of it. And maybe it took some time for like maybe Staley and other people like to really like come to terms on what that would be. But now I'm actually, you got to be fascinated on how this is going to work now.
Yeah. For people that don't know like scheme stuff, when I say zone blitz, like that's a 4-man rush and you drop a lineman and you blitz someone else. Yeah. So you're disguising where the 4th guy comes from, but you still got 7 guys in zone coverage. A lot of times if you rush 5 and have 6 in coverage, defensive coordinators aren't going to want to play zone because there's so much space in between all the players. They'll play man. So that's what a zone blitz is. And I think it's what the Niners, they want to be sound on defense. They don't want to take a player out of coverage to heat up the quarterback. And like they want to have 7 in zone coverage. And you can do that and blitz with a guy like Leonard Floyd. So I don't know. It just feels like that's probably what Staley was doing with the Rams 4 years ago anyway. And that's in his background. And I'm curious to see how he integrates it in what the Niners are doing. Just don't drop Nick Bosa. That doesn't help.
That's dumb. Yeah, don't
No.
do that.